Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nick Harper and these are the top stories of the hour. US President Joe Biden will say in his speech marking the anniversary of the January 6th storming of Capitol Hill by Donald Trump supporters that the country must not allow political violence to become acceptable. Russia and other allied countries dispatch a peacekeeping contingent to Kazakhstan after its president asks for assistance in suppressing the widespread unrest. Taiwan armed forces staged drills simulating a war scenario amid heightened military tensions with China, which claims the island as its own. Tennis superstar Novak Djokovic launches an appeal against Australia's decision to deport him. The world number one will spend the next 3 days in a detention centre till a court decides on his plea. France's parliament approves President Emmanuel Macron's plans for a vaccine pass to help curb the spread of the Omicron variant after a tense debate. And snow blankets Tokyo as hours of flurries force the cancellation of over 100 domestic flights. The weather agency issues the city's first heavy snow warning in 4 years.
We will never give up. We will never concede. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
As America prepares to mark the 1-year anniversary of the attack on Capitol Hill, that time there were hundreds of people who had broken their way through barricades, some of them going on to break their way into the Capitol building and ransacking the offices of lawmakers.
When a police officer grabbed me firmly by the collar like this, I'll never forget that grip.
The events of January 6th did expose critical departmental failures and deficiencies.
This hour, our democracy is under unprecedented assault.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt.
We at the Department of Justice will do everything in our power to defend the American people and American democracy.
January the 6th, 2021. It's a significantly infamous day in the United States of America. Just 1 year ago today, an angry mob broke into the Capitol as the world witnessed the insurrection live on television. 1 year on, Americans have woken up to commemorate the painful events. In a few minutes from now, a ceremony will take place at Capitol Hill, the building which is both a legislative body and a living museum. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and members of Congress will hold a prayer vigil on the Capitol steps. The President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will address the nation from the Hill. The White House has revealed excerpts of Joe Biden's upcoming speech. The president plans to offer a striking portrait of the fragility of the 2-century-old American system and will emphasize the dangers of its collapse. President Biden also plans to call on the nation to recommit itself to peaceful democracy. But most importantly, Biden is expected to lay out the significance of what happened at the Capitol and push back against the lies that were spread.
I would expect that President Biden will lay out the significance of what happened at the Capitol and the singular responsibility President Trump has for the chaos and carnage that we saw. And he will forcibly push back on the lies spread by the former president in an attempt to mislead the American people and his own supporters, as well as distract from his role in what happened. So he will, of course, speak to the moment, to the importance in history of the peaceful transfer of power, of what we need to do to protect our own democracy and be forward-looking, but he will also reflect on the role his predecessor had.
For 5 minutes.
Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has also called for a profound look at the state of the nation in the wake of the anniversary of the violent attack. US Attorney General Merrick Garland vowed to hold accountable anyone who was involved in the attack. He's charged more than 725 people with crimes ranging from disorderly conduct to assaulting police. Out of those, 165 people have pleaded guilty, and at least 70 have been sentenced so far.
We're getting into the Capitol tonight.
Today, I brought us all together again for two reasons. First and foremost, to thank you. Thank you for the work you have done, not just over the last 10 months, but over the past several years. Work that you have done in the face of unprecedented challenges, ranging from an unprecedented, deadly pandemic to an unprecedented attack on our democracy. Thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for your dedication. I am honored to serve alongside you.
Western leaders are stepping up warnings to Moscow. Ahead of security talks with Russia, top US diplomat Antony Blinken has said that upcoming talks will not succeed so long as there is a gun to Ukraine's head. Russia has amassed tens of thousands of troops on the Ukrainian border. It wants next week's discussions to take up its demands for security guarantees against expanding the NATO alliance. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that real progress in the talks will require de-escalation.
If Russia nonetheless chooses to escalate, we will respond swiftly. The United States, Germany, and our allies and partners, including at NATO, the European Union, the G7, have been very clear that Russia will face massive consequences for renewed aggression against Ukraine.
The US Secretary of State also called on Germany to stop the upcoming Nord Stream 2 pipeline with Russia if Moscow invades Ukraine.
With regard to the pipeline itself, as I said, it's not operational. And from our perspective, it's very hard to see gas flowing through that pipeline for it to become operational if Russia renews its aggression on Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the EU foreign policy chief travelled to Ukraine in a show of support for the embattled nation. Joseph Borrell travelled to the eastern Lugansk region and vowed the bloc's full support to Ukraine. He also said any military aggression against Ukraine will have messy consequences and severe costs. This was the first EU High Representative visit to the region since the outbreak of the conflict in 2014.
We are here first to reaffirm the European Union full support to Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity.
After the Geneva talks, Russia will hold meetings with NATO and the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The West is trying to deter Moscow from launching an attack on its ex-Soviet neighbour. Biden has warned Putin directly in two phone calls against any invasion. Measures could potentially include sanctions, greater arms shipments to Ukraine, and even attempts to sever Russia from the international banking system. High-ranking officials from the United States and NATO are set to hold talks with Russia next week. But before that, NATO foreign ministers will hold a video conference on Friday. The meet, in preparation for next week's diplomacy, will be chaired by Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. Both sides are seeking dialogue to prevent open conflict over Ukraine. Our correspondent, Trent Murray, has sent us more details from Berlin.
We're about to enter a very critical few days as Europe and its allies try to work on diffusing these tensions which are building on the border of Ukraine after President Putin amassed an enormous number of troops on that country's doorstep. Those talks coming up in both Geneva as well as Brussels with NATO. Even today we are seeing some smaller discussions between France, Germany, Russia and Ukraine in a setting called the Normandy Forum, which has been a forum for those four countries to discuss tensions in the past. I think essentially the way the EU is viewing this is that it wants to make sure it also has a strong seat at the table, that its voice is heard. We know in the past that President Putin has tried to divide the EU in some ways and speak on an individual level with leaders from European countries. But that visit by Joseph Borrell to eastern Ukraine, I think, was both symbolic and significant, because it really was the first time the EU's foreign policy chief has travelled to that conflict zone, him really wanting to make sure that he is sending a message that the EU is watching these simmering tensions very closely and very cautiously.
Amid heightened military tensions with China, Taiwanese forces have conducted military exercises, imitating a war scenario in a bid to showcase its combat readiness. Taiwan's Air Force jets conducted aerial drills in multiple formations, which replicated scenes of an air-to-air battle. The Taiwanese army also underwent drills with armoured vehicles and personnel performing various exercises through forested and urban areas. The exercises are part of a 3-day-long military drill for Taiwanese officials to exhibit the military prowess and battle readiness of the island ahead of the lunar holiday at the end of this month. Tensions across the Taiwanese Strait have been on a steep rise over the last few years, with Taiwan complaining of multiple instances of unprovoked Chinese aggression near the democratic island's border. It's also termed Chinese actions as grey zone warfare, which aims to wear out Taiwan's forces by making them scramble repeatedly and also gauge the intensity of its responses. A few days ago, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen had warned China against military adventurism. On the other hand, China issued a counter-warning to Taiwan against crossing any red line that could lead to a profound catastrophe. China continues to maintain that Taiwan is part of its extended territory and that it wishes to unite the island into its territory someday. China has also repeatedly attempted to diplomatically isolate Taiwan. In an agreement between Sicily and Greece, fragments of colonial loot are being exchanged, and that's now putting pressure on Britain to return the 2,500-year-old Parthenon marbles acquired during the Ottoman rule.
This is no ordinary fragment of marble. This is part of a monolithic frieze, a Parthenon frieze. The right foot of the figure of Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt, that travelled all the way to Sicily with English consul Robert Fagin in the 19th century. Post his demise, this fragment was sold to a university in Palermo.
È uno scambio importantissimo perché questo piccolo ma significativo frammento del Partenone va ad Atene e in cambio arriverà dal Museo dell'Acropoli questa scultura importante della dea Atena che arricchirà le collezioni del Salinas e soprattutto uno scambio culturale in base al quale potranno essere organizzate delle mostre internazionali.
The loan agreement is expected to materialize into a permanent settlement later on. The Greek authorities have welcomed this agreement and hope that this may further push the British Museum to return the 2,500-year-old Parthenon marbles that were taken by Lord Elgin in the early 19th century. They have been at the heart of a long dispute between Britain and Greece. The Greeks are now demanding that the Parthenon marbles be housed in the Acropolis Museum. Italy has been leading the effort to recover antiques that were looted from its territory, and this exchange is only the beginning of what looks like a tedious, long-drawn artifacts exchange. Bureau Report, WION World is one.
The Doomsday Glacier is one of the biggest glaciers in Antarctica, but it could collapse sooner than estimated. This is what the glacier looks like. It's called the Thwaites Glacier and it spans 120 kilometres. It's as high as a 6-storey building, as big as the American state of Florida, and reports suggest that the glacier could collapse in years. The floating ice shelf acts as a dam for now. It slows the flow of ice off the continent into the ocean. But if this floating ice shelf breaks apart, the Thwaites Glacier will accelerate, and its contribution to sea level rise will increase by as much as 25%.
Thwaites is the main reason, I would say, that we have so large uncertainty in the projections of the future sea level rise. And that is because it's a very remote area and difficult to reach, so we have very few data from it. And it stores a lot of ice, and it's configured in a way so that it's potentially unstable. And that is why we are worried about it.
Now, a team of scientists have left to study this freezing world. The mission is to figure out how much and how fast seas will rise because of global warming eating away at Antarctica's ice. 32 scientists are starting a more than 2-month mission aboard an American research ship to investigate the crucial area. They'll sail to the point the massive glacier faces the Amundsen Sea and may eventually lose large amounts of ice there. The US and
understand how this system works, we will understand other systems too. And my great worry is that this is so fundamental for our future here on Earth, and yet we know so little about it. So in my opinion, regardless what we find down there, it will be good news for humanity because we will be better equipped to meet whatever is coming our way.
It's said when it rains, it pours, but in Japan it seems like when it snows, it never stops. A heavy snowfall warning has been issued in Japan's capital city, Tokyo, for the first time in 4 years. The first snowfall of the year for Japan turned into a bit of a scare after Japan's meteorological agency put Tokyo and 3 surrounding districts under a heavy snow alert. Nearly 2 inches of snow had piled up in Tokyo, while temperatures dropped to minus 0.4 degrees Celsius.
特に会社からまだ何も指示が出てないので、とりあえずは定時で帰って明日も普通通りに出社する予定なんですけど、できれば泊まる前に帰りたいです私が使ってる電車が結構風とかにも弱い電車なので雪もちょっと心配です。
Though the city has not seen major traffic disruptions, the weather agency has warned about icy roads causing possible traffic delays and disruptions during commuting hours in the evening.
この辺あんまり降らないっていうのもあって珍しいんで、そうですね。交通機関が止まっちゃうとちょっと大変ですけど、少し降ってくれる分にはすごいいい景色なんで僕は好きですね。
Over 100 domestic flights had to be cancelled due to the extreme weather conditions. The snow caused the cancellation of nearly 100 domestic flights at Tokyo's main airport. However, no international flights were cancelled. More snow is expected to fall until later on tonight. Electric cars have hit record sales in Norway. As per reports, the EVs made up nearly 2/3 of Norway's new sales in 2021, as the country pursues its goal of becoming the first to end the sale of petrol and diesel cars.
Electric cars made up 65% of Norway's new sales in 2021, as the country pursues its goal of becoming the first to end the sale of petrol and diesel cars. With a population of 5.4 million, Norway has the world's highest proportion of electric vehicles. Overall, new sales rose by 25% in 2021 to more than 170,000 cars. Almost 2/3 of them were fully electric. Tesla was the top-selling automobile brand overall in 2021, and the Tesla Model 3 was the single most popular model of the year in the Scandinavian nation. So what's driving the shift? Oil-producing Norway exempts battery electric vehicles from taxes imposed on internal combustion engines. This tax break is expected to help drive the proportion of overall electric sales as high as 80% in 2022. And so, while small, affluent Norway is seen as a key market for electric vehicle players, such as Polestar. Here's Polestar CEO Thomas Ingenlath.
Norway was the market where, obviously, there was the biggest openness for EVs. There was the biggest understanding for what it means to drive an EV, and the biggest welcoming for actually having an alternative.
Chinese electric car maker NIO launched lavish showrooms in central Oslo in 2021. The company also plans to install charging and battery swapping stations.
70% already have an EV, and of course going more in the North Norway. The infrastructure also on the charging possibilities is not so good as in Oslo, but we're getting there.
Norway plans to end petrol and diesel-powered car sales by 2025.
US telecom companies and airlines have been fighting for weeks over the potential impact of 5G services on aircraft. Here's some background on the dispute and a detailed report on the problems.
Does 5G pose a threat to airline safety? US telecom companies and airlines have been fighting over this question for weeks. In the latest development, Verizon Communications and AT&T have agreed to a 2-week delay to their rollout. So, what's the safety dispute all about? In early 2021, the US auctioned mid-range 5G bandwidth to mobile phone companies in the 3.7 to 3.98 GHz range, also known as the C-band. In recent months, the US aviation industry groups have stepped up concerns, warning of the risk of interference with flight equipment. For background, the airline industry uses radar altimeters to measure altitude. They help minimize the risk of accidents or collisions by giving an accurate reading of the proximity to the ground. Radar altimeters operate in the 4.2 to 4.4 GHz range. There are concerns that there is not enough of a buffer from the 5G frequencies. Airlines have warned that without an agreement on safety precautions, the issue could disrupt up to 4% of daily flights. So, is this a problem elsewhere outside of the United States? The rollout of 5G services elsewhere has broadly gone ahead without airline safety concerns. Take the European Union. In 2019, the EU set standards for mid-range 5G frequencies in the 3.4 to 3.8 GHz range. They have been taken into use in many of the bloc's 27 member states so far without issue. In South Korea, the 5G mobile communication frequency is 3.42 to 3.7 GHz band. There has been no report of interference with radio waves since commercialization of 5G in April 2019.
And finally, a 17-year-old science prodigy in Mexico is working on an app for her deaf sister. This app could revolutionise sign language and communicating with the hearing impaired. We'll leave you with this story. Thanks for watching.
The interest arose from my 25-year-old sister who suffers from deep and severe hearing loss. I was inspired by the discrimination towards her, the looks and comments from classmates, neighbours, teachers and relatives. This is what inspired me to ask, what am I doing to help my sister?
usé durante mi estancia en entrenamiento de laboratorio en UNAM, se requirió para poder seguir aprendiendo y también los proyectos en los que he participado.
¿Un esquema de qué?
De la membrana celular. Esto pues es parte de todo y creo que es el momento.
It's about time we change our way of thinking. It's time to rewire people and create a culture where in the future there will be lots of children working on scientific and technological projects like some already are.
This is right, Arab.